Hello, I'm Matt from World of Ukes, and I've got a tutorial here today. This is for Uke magazine. In issue 39's Technique Zone, there's a feature called Making Progress, where I'm going to run through a chord progression, one that's fairly simple but is designed to make you look good because it uses more of the fingerboard, but is actually relatively simple because it only uses two different shapes on the fingerboard moving up. And I'm going to explain some notation, there'll be some tab in there, but just basically to begin with, this is what it's going to be, certainly the chords in the progression. So the purpose is to get you further up the fingerboard without having to put too many fingers down and make it too complicated. So the notation, so this is the musical notes in this exercise are written out for a low G ukulele, which is what I'm using here. Now it will also work on a high G ukulele or a baritone ukulele, but the notes in the notation that they're low G, but you can use the shapes, you can use the tab on other kind of ukuleles as well, and they'll produce a nice noise. I'll demonstrate quickly with a high G ukulele. And move on to a baritone. And all the while I'm going to explain different ways of playing the same chord progression, just so you can vary it up, you can make it sound more interesting, and hopefully if you get the shapes into your head, you can not do them in the same order, you can move them around, you can improvise. So I'll do a bit of that at the end as well. So we'll start with our low G ukulele and look at the musical notes and some of the notation. Now I can read music. I have forgotten a lot of what I could read. It was something I did as a child. So I'm going to make this nice and easy. So if you are a musical genius or you're very fluent in writing music and how it's notated, then there will be some basic stuff, but I don't want to leave anyone out. So I'm going to keep it nice and simple. So this chord progression uses just two shapes. The first is the shape you would use for an A on a ukulele. So you've got on the G string, you've got the second fret, and on the C string, you've got the first fret. So that's what you would normally play when you use an A. So that's going to appear a couple of times in this chord progression. We're going to move that shape further up, but it'll still be that shape. The second shape, which we would use in this chord progression in the first instance, is very similar, but you're going to move that first finger up one fret and move the second finger up two frets. So it's like an A, but you're moving one finger further towards the bridge. So that's our A. The next chord in this progression, you would move the whole shape up one and then move your middle finger up an extra one. So what you're ending up with is the fourth fret on the G string and the second fret on the C string. After that, we're going to move that shape, we're going to keep that shape exactly, but move the whole thing up two frets. So on the G string we have the 6th fret, and on the C string we have the 4th fret. Then we're going to move back to our A shape. So to do this, we're moving our first finger up 2 frets and we're moving the middle finger up 1 fret. So we're ending up with G string, 7th fret and C string, 6th fret. And then we're going to move that whole shape up, both fingers, 2 frets. So we end up with the G string at the 9th fret and the C string at the 8th fret. So we've got, in the magazine I've called this shape 1 and shape 2, so your A shape, and the shape 2 is the slightly extended version. So when you put those together and go up the fingerboard in the 5 different chords, you end up with this. The way the music's written down, we've got, and bearing in mind I want to keep this basic for anyone who's unfamiliar, you've got notes which are coloured in black, which is a crotchet it's called, and notes which have just an outline but without the note being filled in, that's called a minim. So on the tab we've got a black note followed by a white note. So you would think that would be 1 beat and then 2 beats. But actually in this instance we've got something else going on. There's a little dot next to the minim, and that is telling us to play the value of that note half as much again. Complicated? So it basically means you're playing it for 3 beats. So you'd have the crotchet, which is 1, and then the minim, which would go on for 3. So you'd have 1, 2, 3. I had to do some counting in my own head then. It's just because there isn't a notation for 3 beats. So it basically means play that one 1.5 times. Now your minim, as we've just discussed, is 2 beats, so you're playing it 1.5 times. 1.5 times 2 is 3, so it just means play it 3 times as long as the first one, and we end up with this. We'll next move on to some finger picking. Throughout this exercise we're just going to use the same pattern of chords, so in a way we can, once we've got that nailed down, we can worry a bit more about what our right hand is doing, and we're going to do some picking next. If you've ever tried any picking, you might have a particular pattern that sticks in your head the most. I certainly do. It's something that I always come back to, and we start with the G string, move up to the A string, then down to the E string, then to the C string. Sometimes you might find it easier if you allocate one of your fingers or your thumb to each of those strings. For me, I prefer to use my 2 fingers in a running man motion, I call it. So it's a bit like this, and go from 4th to 1st to 2nd to 3rd. If you try it and it's tricky, just slow it right down and repeat. I remember when I was first learning to pick, I would often watch a film. I had my hands over the strings, so I wasn't making a noise, and almost unconsciously I would be completing that motion. But I could keep watching the telly, and over time that just became second nature. you could get faster. You can hear it a bit there, but you know, when you've got a film blasting away, you're not going to hear that. So if we apply this to this chord progression, so as we move up, it'll sound a bit more interesting. So we start with that shape 1, the A shape, and then move to shape 2 on the second string of the C string and the fourth fret, second fret of the C string and fourth fret of the G string, and keep moving as the tab shows. Back to the notation again. You know, this is really for people who look at these stalks and dots and think, well, what's that all about? You'll notice that the dots are black, but they are joined together with little stalks at the top, with a black line across the top. They are quavers, and it means they have a time value of half of 1 beat. So in this case, you've got 4 joined together, and you can think of that as being like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So if I go through that, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So it's just, rather than counting 1, 2, 3, 4, each time you hit a string, it's half of one of those beats. So that's what those joined together notes mean. In the next part of the exercise, we're looking at some more picking, but we're going to be not just picking one note at a time. At times in this one, we're going to pick 2 strings together. Often when you think of picking, you think of picking one string, then the next one, then the next one, but you can pick combinations, and one I like to do involves picking the middle 2 strings, your C and your E together, then moving down to the G string, and then up to the A, and repeating that. So it's middle 2, G, A. That is something which you can again practice on your own. You don't need to worry so much about what's happening here. Actually, it's probably nicer if you just hold down a chord. It sounds a little bit better. And just repeat it. In each chord of the chord sequence we're looking at here, I'm going to play that little pattern twice, and we're employing 2 of the kind of notes that we've already discussed: the quavers, which are half a beat, and the crotchets, which are 1 beat, meaning I'm starting with 2 quavers, 2 half beats, then 1 crotchet, which will last longer than the other 2. So we'll hear it. It'll probably sound, it'll come together with what we mean. The final part of the exercise is the trickiest bit, and we're going to play some picking and strumming together. Just makes things a bit more interesting. I think with this one I might demonstrate what I'm going to play first and then talk about it afterwards. I think it would be a bit easier. So here we go. So we're starting with a pick of the G string, and then it's followed up immediately with a strum. On the notation, you'll notice there's a squiggly line that goes down. That means to strum those 4 notes together. So that's all the strings. But just before that, we've got that single pick. Now I'm using almost like a shortened strum, so I'm hitting the string with my nail that way. The reason for that is then we're moving straight into a strum. And I just find it's the fastest method to do it, because you're basically just shortening the same motion. But you could do it with your thumb perhaps. But it's two movements, whereas this is the same movement but shorter, so that's how I prefer to do it. And then we're moving after that to pick the A string, and then the E string, and then the C string. And then removing our shapes. In the notation, there's a curiosity here, which is a little curvy line between two notes. It's called a tie. Now, when you look at it, you can see two individual notes, so you would assume you would play twice, but that curvy line means you play it once, and you add the times of the two notes together. So although you see two notes, two quavers there, you're actually playing it once. The tie says add them together, don't play them twice. So they're both the same. This is when they're both the same note, which they are. And I've exaggerated it a bit there, but it just means that top string, that when you pick it, that lasts a bit longer. So if you just listen again, you'll hear when I hit that top string, it lasts longer than the other bits. So although you see the two notes, you're actually playing it once but twice as long. So that's what that tie means between the two. When you put these together, and any other picking techniques or patterns that you want to put together, or different kinds of strumming, you can begin to experiment with this. You can move up and down. You don't have to do it in the sequence. I'm just showing you these shapes work. But then what I'd like you to do is explore those and move around and do different things and improvise, and just use that as a pattern, as a basis to go on a bit further and do your own thing. I think sort of improvising at home is something that is fun, but it also pushes you on in a way that doesn't feel like practice. If you look at these shapes and think, well, I know where they are now, but you don't have to play them as I've written them down here. I don't usually play them that way myself very often, but you can move between the shapes in any way you see fit, and they'll all work together. Just a little bit of a note about that. This is an A, and every note that we're playing is in the A major scale. So everything works together. So as long as you stick to those shapes that I've given you, every note that you play is somewhere in the A major scale, so they're all going to chime in nicely together, whatever order you do them in, whatever strings you pick, and whatever order you play, pick those strings in. That's just basically just randomly playing different strings together. As long as my chords fall into that pattern, everything's in the A major scale, so it's going to sound right at least, even if I didn't play it very nicely. Anyway, I'm going to finish with just a little bit of improvisation using that chord progression, just to show you what you could do if you want to take it a little bit further. This tutorial is written down and explained in words as well in Uke Magazine issue 39, which is available from the World of Uke's website. So that's 39 issues, so it's 9 3/4 years it's been going now, and it's packed full of stuff to help you learn. It's not particularly expensive, and I think, if you just got one piece of advice even out of every issue, and every issue has 60 pages, then I think it's well worth it, because if you think what you'd spend on a lesson, for example, if you got one piece of advice which was really helped you play, you'd think you'd got good value for your £15, your £25, but we're talking a lot less than that. A subscription at the moment for 4 issues over the year is £20 in the UK, so I don't think you can quibble with the value if you get, it's also nicely done, nicely produced, so please do get a copy if you haven't tried it already. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll finish off with some improvisation around this chord progression. I'm going to choose a different uke, I might just to have a bit of fun. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again in the future. So that was just messing around using those chord progressions in a random fashion. I switched to high G just to, I usually play high G at home, just like that sort of sparkliness. So that's just an example of what you could do. You could do anything. Hold those chord shapes down and go crazy. Thanks. See you later.
worldofukes.co.uk worldofukes.co.uk